content is king. I don't believe that you can produce too much content because there's all these filters and things like that. And if you put enough out there, more people will see it. Welcome to the Matt Laricy Project. This is a show about all things real estate, business, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Each show consists of myself, Matt Laricy, and a guest. This week, we do not have a guest. We got to talk about the election. And this is Season 3, Episode 8, How the Election Affects the Market. Today is October 14th, and, we're creeping up on the election, and it's a big topic that a lot of people ask about and how it affects the market. So what we did is we did what we've been doing in the past is that our admins, our agents, our clients, anybody who has asked me a question about the election, I've written down, and then we've also asked social media about what their questions would be about the election, and we compiled all of these here, and I'm going to do what I've done in the past and just kind of read these off. So we'll start with, do you think whoever wins the election will drastically affect the market? Do you think one could be more positive than the other? I don't really think that one person's really going to affect the marketplace. Every politician has a million plans and ideas, and only like maybe one or two of those things ever come to fruition. So I'm not really terribly concerned. Do I think one will have more positive than another? I mean, technically speaking, Trump is more favorable to real estate, but I also don't think if Biden gets elected, it'll really change the market that much. Biden does have, he wants to get rid of the 1031 exchanges, which would really hurt the market. A lot of presidents have said they want to get rid of the 1031 exchanges. It's never got passed, so I'm not terribly concerned about it. How do elections in general affect the market? In big cities, they have a big effect on the market. See, the thing you have to think about is that, a lot of people don't like uncertain times. And typically speaking, the market is really good up until election season, and election season kind of dies down the market. If you look in 2016, the market was red hot up until about September when it was Clinton against Trump, and it was like an emergency brake was pulled, and the market drastically slowed down. And every agent I talked to told me like, oh my God, we're going to be in this bubble. The market's going to drop. If so-and-so gets elected, whether it be Clinton or Trump, the world's going to end. We're not going to have a good real estate market. And, we had the election. Trump won, Q1 hit, and it was the best first quarter ever. Well, not ever, but one of the best first quarters we've seen. And I'm not saying that's directly related to, Trump or if Clinton would have won him. And I think it would have been the same thing. People just don't like the uncertain times. The other thing you have to think about is what do buyers do during uncertain times, right? So the rich usually hold during uncertain times. Like the rich aren't very risk heavy. Like, they're rich for a reason because they take calculated risks. So I'm not saying there's no rich people making moves right now, but the luxury market tends to slow down in uncertain times. The international market also tends to slow down, okay? And especially during times like these, since the international market can't come here. And then, the in-town buyers kind of slows down in big cities too, because a lot of people are, they're uncertain of, hey, if the 1031 exchange goes away or if this thing goes away that the candidate's treating, or touting, they get nervous about maybe making a big purchase. So really, it's just like first-time buyers and step-up buyers that are buying during election season. So, it's not as many of people that are normally buying. And if you had it on a pie graph, we're just eliminated a big portion of the pie graph of who's going to be buying during the election season. So that's what happens during election seasons, and that's why it has such honestly a negative impact on markets in big cities. Obviously, this year's a little bit different. Do you expect the market to pick up after the election season? Yes. I think that both parties are trying to win this by fear, and I've been saying this all along. I said that I think the Republicans are trying to win this by telling you that if they don't get reelected, that your stock portfolio is going to go down to zero, so people are nervous about their money. And the Democrats are trying to win this by pouring fuel on the fire with a lot of different things and telling you that if Trump gets reelected, if they don't get reelected, all these cities are going to burn and yada, yada, yada. And I'm not saying either party is right or wrong. I think it's politics, guys. That's why everybody hates politicians. There's all this stuff out there that's creating fear, and the average person like you and I are just sitting here and wanting to live our normal lives. So, I think the minute this election season is done with, the fear-mongering is going to leave the marketplace. People are going to start to feel normal again. The negativity in the press on both sides is going to go away, and we're going to have that first quarter. I think we're going to come back swinging. I think I'm on record saying that I think next Q1 of next year is going to be one of the best first quarters we've ever seen. Why do elections cause fear in the market to begin with? I kind of touched on this, but the reality is that both parties want you to believe that they're the savior. And what they're going to try to do is tell you that, hey, they're the savior because the other party is evil. And if the other party wins, the world's over. And both parties do that. And, a lot of people have strong allegiances with their parties. And that makes you think that, like, if the other person wins, that something drastically terrible is going to happen. And the reality is, it's probably not going to happen terribly, and we'll all live our lives like you don't know anything has changed. And I know that's terrible to say, and a lot of people are probably upset that I just said that, but that is the reality. So that creates fear into the marketplace, and that's what the politicians are trying to do, and that makes the real estate market tough. If rates remain low and unemployment remains low, et cetera, do you expect the market to bounce back quickly? Yes. I mean, people forget that July was one of the best Julys we've seen in Chicago. And then you factor in that, the civil unrest. And as we got towards election season, the market's gotten terrible. So we went from a great market to a terrible market. And I think we're going to go back to a great market. The other thing is we've talked about before is that I do think COVID's, running its end of its course. At least I hope so. And I think it will. So we'll be through that, the civil unrest and the election. And I think, we're going to bounce back very, very quickly. I think we're going to see almost a blink of the eye. This is going to feel like we're going to go from doom and gloom to unbelievable market very, very quick. Our sales lost during an election year. Lost forever. So essentially, if a deal falls apart, do we never see that person again? I mean, sometimes there are a few people who definitely have fired us recently because they're upset that their place isn't moving, or they're surprised at the lack of activity. And like I tell everybody as a fact is that, like, it's a very tough market. But a lot of the sales that we lose that die, we end up selling first quarter. I remember in 2016, I could count on my hands a few ones for sure. I remember this one place that we couldn't give away in December of that year, and we took it off for 3 weeks, and it came back on the market and sold for $35,000 more than when we just had it listed at. My clients were like, "What the hell just happened?" I said, "The mentality changed." People forget that a lot of sales in real estate is all about the mentality, and that's ran by the media. And when the media changes the story, it's funny how crazy the market picks back up. Do you think buyers can take more advantage of the fear in the market? Do you think there's a chance they could get better deals? Yes. I said this in our last podcast, that now is going to be the best time to buy that you're going to probably see in the next few years. If you're looking to get a great deal in the downtown market, specifically in the high-rise market, you only got about 60 days left. Once the election's over with and we creep closer towards the first of the year, you're done. In fact, today, October 14th, is probably when you're going to get the best deals, because a lot of this inventory is going to start rolling off the market. So yeah, you have, when there's blood in the water, that's when you strike. I say it a million times. You don't get rich in good markets, you get rich in bad markets. So right now is a bad market. So this is the time to get, take advantage of the opportunity. How many sellers would decide to throw in the towel come November? I would be willing to say 30%, I could say with certainty, are going to throw in the towel come November. I think it'll actually be higher, but I think for sure we're going to see at least 30% of the inventory roll off. People are, there's a lot of people who don't have to sell. And they're looking at it, they're like, man, a lot of people aren't moving in the winter because of COVID. They're nervous about the disease spreading quicker. You got still the civil unrest, the fear in the market. And of course you got the election. And they're like, you know what? I don't have to move today. Let's throw in the towel and reevaluate this in the spring. And that's why I think it's technically probably going to be closer to 50%, but we'll say 30% to be a little bit more conservative. People say this is the biggest and most important election. What does that mean for Chicago? Honestly, it doesn't mean much. Every single election is the most important election of all time. And they've been saying that since the dawn of America. And that's how politics works. Politics is a very bloody battle. For everybody out there who's studied politics their life, I just like history. I mean, there was a guy named Caesar who got killed over politics, and he was beloved by everybody. So, I mean, the reality is that politics will always be a bloody game, and it's going to be a bloody game for the rest of human nature and life. So I don't buy into this is the most important election ever. I think the next election they're going to say that, and the election after that they're going to say into it. And if I'm you, I wouldn't buy into it. What happens if the civil unrest continues after the election? I think it'll still probably continue on. I just don't think it's going to be as crazy as it is now. I don't think it matters who gets elected. I also think that, I hate to break it to everybody, that in Chicago, people aren't going to be protesting in first week of January because it's going to be below zero outside. And it's going to be cold in, half the country. So I think there's a lot of things that have to get changed in the country, but I don't see it being as fueled as it is today. Does the Federal Reserve stock market go ahead and head with the housing market during elections? I think what this is asking me is like, does the Federal Reserve and the housing market kind of do the same things during election season? I do think the Fed Reserve watches the election and what's happening in the market and makes a calculated decision of whether or not they want to, raise or lower rates. By all indications of everything that's chosen, it does look like the rates are going to definitely remain low for the rest of the year. Are they going to remain as low as they are today? Probably not. But, they could get lower. Who knows? They're definitely at historic lows, and it's going to be close to either the lowest ever or close to the lowest ever for the remainder of the year. Do you think changes in tax policy would drastically affect the market? Yeah. Biden has some lofty goals of huge increases in taxes, and that will hurt the market. But again, there's 3 branches of government, so it still has to pass, guys. So let's not get too crazy worked up about it. Chicago and Illinois has the fair tax, which is claiming that it's only affecting people above $250,000. But the goal here is to eventually raise taxes for everybody, whether you're making $40,000 or $50,000. So if you're making $50,000 and your tax goes from 4% to 10%, it's going to really affect you, and that's what happened in California and some other states. So if something like that passes, I think it'll have a drastic change in the real estate market down the line. For today, I don't think it's really going to make too big of a difference. But time will tell. We can't tell you how much tax is going to change the market for 2-3 years from now, because that's when you feel the impact of it. What type of buyers are more likely to be cautious during an election? Which ones are more likely to purchase and take more risks? Easy. Luxury buyers are a lot less likely to take risks during election season. A lot of times people buying luxury, it's a want to buy. It's not a need to buy. It's like, I got some excess money and I'd love to, dip my toe in the water of getting something cooler. During times like this, when we talk about taxes and all this uncertainty, they're like, let's take a step back and see kind of how this plays out. And the people who are most likely to take risk, younger first-time buyers. They don't have as much to lose. You're spending, under $500,000. I'm not saying that under $500,000 is not a lot of money, but if they're first buy, they're willing to kind of risk it all. It's crazy because it should be the opposite. It should be the luxury take risk, and the first-time buyers kind of are more cautious. But 9 times out of 10, that's not the case. Do you think prices will fluctuate during the 2020 election in the Chicago market? Will we see a decrease, increase? We're definitely seeing a fluctuation happen in the Chicago market. Certain parts of the city and certain types of properties, so like luxury properties, high-rises, those prices are kind of coming down a little bit. 3-4 unit walk-ups in like Lincoln Park and Westtown are still holding up very strong. Technically speaking, on average, for all the downtown markets, I just looked at through September, I just looked at a thing called InfoSparks. All prices were up, and the only one that was down was the Loop for condos, and it was down 0.8%. So we're not even looking at like that drastic of price drops. In fact, everybody's still up. It's just there's a lot of inventory in the market, and a lot of inventory has come on the market recently, so a lot of people think the price is coming down. But again, in about 2 weeks from now, half that inventory is going to roll off the market come November. Well, I said 30% of inventory is going to roll off the market, and you're going to start seeing like those price drops kind of start to cease a little bit. How do you think COVID-19 has affected the election and market this year compared to other years? Obviously, COVID-19 has changed the political strategy for a lot of the politicians, and I think it's probably had a much drastic impact on where a lot of people are going to vote. But for the real estate market, it's kind of like a double whammy on where people are. There's a lot of people, you read in the papers at 06, or the market's the best since 06, and it's this great market and blah, 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 blah. But, what the papers aren't publishing is that due to COVID and the election, a lot of people are kind of taking a sidestep and saying, like, I don't really know if I want to move during all of this stuff. And I think that, COVID is, one of those fuels to the fire of why markets in big cities are really struggling. Do you think mortgage rates will remain low after the election is finished? I do think they're going to remain low, through most of next year. Will they go up starting in the summer? I have no clue. If I had to put money on the table, I'd say that they're not going to go above like 4.5 by next year, but who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong. Once the election is over, do you think more people will flock to the city again? Yes. I think once the election's over with, that's creating a lot of fear in the environment. It's creating a lot more fuel on the fire of some of the uncertainty that's happening with everything in life. And I think once that goes away, people are going to come back to the city. I was just saying this to many people earlier, is that People tell me nobody wants to work outside of their home anymore. Everybody says everybody's going to work from home for the rest of their lives. And I keep bringing up to people, like, don't forget that WeWork was a huge company that everybody wanted to work at because they hated working at home and they wanted to work in a shared work environment. It was huge. Also, places like Soho House and these other places where people love to, be in these trendy environments and work from there all day, blah, blah, blah. And now people tell me that nobody ever wanted to do that in the first place. Like, it makes no sense. The minute there's some sort of cure that's talked about that you'll be able to get, all those places are going to reopen again and people are going to flock back to the cities. I do not believe in the Forbes articles that tells you that, New York's never going to exist anymore and that Chicago's gone. Time will tell if I'm a complete idiot, which I probably am an idiot, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to love big cities. Any advice for buyers trying to buy now or investors? My advice for buyers is that focus in on what you want and buy it now and buy it quickly. For investors, this is the time you want to deal. I cannot tell you how many people called me in June of this year and was like, Matt, I want to steal on a property. I'm like, now's not a good time to get a steal because June in Chicago, there was no inventory in the market. And the market was really, really hot. So remember, guys, June, May, July, really hot in the city. Now it's October, November, and the market's really soft. And people are telling me like, oh my God, nobody's going to live here again. So in 3 months, magically, nobody's going to want to live in big cities. I'm not buying into it. So if you're an investor or a buyer, strike it now. Because I'm telling you right now, in February, when you call me and say, wow, how did those people get that price in October? I'm going to be like, well, you didn't have the balls to buy then. How did the last election between Clinton and Trump affect the market? Did you notice slowdown? Yes. I said this earlier. I cannot describe how hot 16 was. And when that fall hit, how crazy slow it got and how much drama people got. And you have to remember, a lot of people who dictate the market are agents themselves. And I remember specifically, I have listings in my head that I remember where other agents were calling me and be like, I cannot believe I haven't had a showing in 2 weeks. Like, I think there's a bubble. I think prices are going to drop like 30 or 40%. These are realtors that were making these comments. And then lo and behold, these same agents called me mid-January and were like, oh my God, can you believe how busy I am? Oh my God, the market's crazy right now. Like, everything is multiple bids. Like, I don't want to work with buyers, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, aren't you the same person in November that told me that we wouldn't have jobs anymore? So you have to realize that you have to educate yourself on the market, the trends and the patterns. And if you can predict the patterns and the trends, you'll be able to see what happens in the market. Yes, right now, the market's slow because of the election. Yes, during the Clinton and Trump election, the market was slow. Both people said, referring back to that question last time, that the Clinton-Trump election was the most important election in the history of America. Like my point is that, things change, people change, the change of the guard happens, but the real estate market long-term isn't going to be affected by, a quick president or two. What was Q1 like after the 17 election? It was unbelievably on fire. Take a look at how quick things moved. I remember that everything was that's when pocket listings became like huge. 16 and 17 is when pocket listings were like as big as, in fact, it was because of 17 that a network called Top Agent Network like really started to become into existence because so many things were selling off market. And in fact, the MLS was so mad by it that's in 17, the rise of the pocket listings is why there is now a private network on the MLS. And when people were calling me during the pandemic, talking to me about like how do you sell a lot more things virtually today than you've ever done before? I said, no. In 16 and 17, I sold way more things virtually because there was no inventory and everything was selling. It would be like if you offered on unit 2005 and you got all bid and 2105 comes in the market, you're making an offer without going in there because you know what it looks like. So, Q1 17, out of control. Do you think elections affect investors or regular buyers more? I think it affects regular buyers more because, in fact, I think it affects both of them in the sense that they both get to win. I think it affects sellers more than buyers. I think it affects sellers because sellers get nervous and some of them drop their pants because, they're just too fearful of what's going to happen. Which party is better for real estate? I mean, I honestly don't really think it matters. I mean, technically speaking, Republicans tend to be a little bit more business oriented, so that would, technically speaking, make for a little bit of a better market. But if you look at who's president during, big real estate booms, there's been Democrats and there's been Republicans. So the reality is, personally, I don't really think it's going to make a big difference who gets elected. Why would an election even matter? Again, we kind of talked about this, but people hate change. I always describe it as like, when you have a building and it's looking out, and there's a building getting built, but it's not built yet. Like they're like, hey, there's going to be a building there. the values drop on that side of the building because people are like, oh my God, like, it's going to look terrible. I can't ever live there again. And all of a sudden the building goes up and people are like, hey, that's a great view. And you're like, well, the values on the side dropped because everybody thought that this building here would drastically affect the long-term value of it. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but 9 times out of 10, that's kind of how it is. So, it's just a change. That's why election kind of matters in the marketplace. Will sales drop after the election? No. I think sales in the city are going to go up, and I think prices are going to go up. Could the market get worse after election? I don't think so. I'd be willing to bet a lot of money saying I don't think so. Could be wrong. I mean, I can't foresee the future, but I realistically don't think. I think the market's going to be gangbusters once the election's over with. Should I wait to list till after election or put it up now? I think it matters what type of property you have. If you have a $2 million plus luxury high-rise condo in the Loop, I would probably wait. If you have a $300,000 to $500,000 condo in Lincoln Park or Lakeview, definitely put it up. It depends. Everything is relative. Also, it doesn't hurt to throw it on the market now and give it a month and see what happens. It also doesn't hurt to keep your place up now and kind of see how it goes. Come Turkey Day, I'd probably remove it depending on what type of property it is. But yeah, I don't think it hurts keeping your throwing it up depending on the type of property. How will Chicago be affected by the winner of the election? Chicago is a Democratic city. So, I don't really think we've got a Republican now. It didn't really do anything. If a Democrat gets elected, I don't see why it's going to really change anything. There's some other tax laws that are locally that could affect the market as we discussed. But realistically, I don't think if either gets elected, the market's going to drastically change here in Chicago. Does the election affect big cities more than suburbs? Yes. And it's kind of like what I talked about before is because I do think people in big cities tend to move more, right? If you buy a house in the suburbs, a lot of people out there watching, you could probably remember that the house you grew up in, you might have lived there with your family for 25 years. Or, lived there for 18 years. But, and I get it if you're like, well, I moved every 5 years. That's a different story. But I'm saying the general person will kind of stay in their suburb house for the majority of their life. So when you have an election, it doesn't affect them that much because people aren't trading around their properties as much. In big cities, half my inventory right now, people have lived in for less than 24 months. It's not uncommon for people to live in their, condo or whatever for 3 to 7 years. 7 years is a long time for a condo. So when you have an election and you usually are used to a lot of things trading and a lot of movement, and you notice, an emergency brake get pulled, you do notice that it has a much bigger impact. Plus, you have to factor in that big cities have a lot of international buyers, out-of-state buyers that we talked about. So, yeah, the big cities have a much, much bigger effect, or the election has a much, much bigger effect on big cities than they do on suburban markets. Do you think a lot of people use the election as an excuse for why the market is bad? Yeah, listen, if there's any type of turbulence, people are going to use that as an excuse. I don't use the election as the only excuse why a lot of things aren't selling right now, but it has an impact. I think a lot of people are just giving up because of the election. They're saying, oh, it's the election. I'm just going to throw in the towel and not work for the rest of the year. I see that a lot with a lot of agents right now because they're like, I've made what I want to make, so I'm just going to coast the rest of the year. But, in the end of third and fourth quarter is when you have to grind the most. This is when you have to work the hardest to try to sell properties. Do you see less international buyers during election season? Yes. Obviously, this year, normally we have 30 to 35% of our sales are international. We would have to look, but I have to have less than 5% international. I don't even remember the last time I did an international sale. But definitely during election season, you see less international buyers because they're outside of the country. Other countries are super cognitive of our election. If you don't believe me, go to a different country, start talking to somebody, and one of the first things they're going to do is bring up our president. It happens all the time. So when they see a change of guard happening in America, because in some countries, that doesn't happen as often as it does here, they get a little bit more cautious and be like, I don't know if I'm going to invest in America right this second. So yeah, I definitely think there's a lot less international buyers happening during this time. There is a talk about the winner of the election may get delayed. Will that affect the market? I think this is probably coming from there's both parties are talking about with this mail-in ballot stuff that by the time they collect them all, we may not know for 2 or 3 weeks or maybe 2 months till after the supposed election is done with, so we know who the winner is. I have no idea how that's going to work out. I don't think anybody really does, minus the people at the top. The reality is if it takes 2 months to find out who the president is, yeah, I'm sure it's going to have an effect on the market because, again, as we've been talking, the election creates a lot of uncertain times in in that in-between period, people are going to get really nervous about what's going to happen. Why are you so bullish on Q1? I've beat this, drum as hard as I can, but the reality is I am as confident as I can be that I think that the market is going to drastically change because I think the mentality is going to change. The media controls the story, and they're controlling a lot of fear right now. And I keep telling people the way it's been talking towards big cities lately, it reminds me of 2011. In 2011, the media told everybody that America wouldn't exist anymore, and the fact that nobody would own real estate. They'd be like, from now on, we're only going to rent. We got burned by buying real estate, and nobody's going to do it again. And I remember my old man constantly saying is that I wish the media would just shut up, would just stop talking about how bad the market is, and the market would change because people wouldn't be as scared. And lo and behold, all the people who wanted to buy in 11 but waited to 13, I remember because I sold in 2006 on. I remember in 13, everybody would be like, "Wow, I can't believe they got such a $100,000 left in 2011. Like, why can't I get that day?" And I was like, "Well, you didn't have the balls to buy." So, I'm seeing the same pattern happen right now. So again, when I talk about how do I know the market so well, I study it. I look for the patterns. I look at past, what happened in the past to notice indicators for what could happen in the future. We're selling 400 plus properties a year. I'm talking to thousands upon thousands of people a year about what's happening, from $150,000 buyers to $10 million buyers. So I'm doing everything I can to research and study the market. And because of all the stuff that I think is happening and all the research I've done, that's why I think Q1 is going to be so great. In what way can election results make the real estate market worse in big cities? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe somebody gets elected and they say, you can't live in a high rise anymore. Who knows? Somebody passes a crazy law. But again, remember, guys, in America, there's 3 branches of government. So I don't really think anything can happen in an election result that's going to make the real estate market just, plummet. One thing I could say is we want to make sure that, the most important thing that you can do right now is vote. Vote in whatever favor you want to do, but I think it's important as your right to get out there and do so. I think everybody can agree or disagree with each other in whatever matter there is. But, I always say that's why they make red cars, black cars, and blue cars. Everybody's got their own opinion. Everybody's entitled to it. There's no right or wrong answer. The main thing is knowing is that, we're all in this together. So where can people find me? What do I want to plug? I'd like to plug MattLaricygroup.com. You can find me on Instagram at mlaricy. You can also follow Matt Laricy Group on Instagram. Make sure to tune into our next podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening to the Matt Laricy Project. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on Instagram, and like us on Facebook.